Good afternoon, everyone. Eric Turner with the planning teams at SDG&E. So your upgrades, your rewires, your new service. I'm kind of a builder liaison. Been in the planning department for quite some time. We're here to support as you electrify, where you need service, where you need to upgrade your service, and happy to help over here at the booth. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Rhoda. I'm with SDG&E's Customer Programs. I represent the low-income team, and we have a plethora of programs either for your tenant, for multifamily residential programs such as solar, or retrofit upgrades to your building. So if you're interested, come talk to me.
Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Lampkin. I'm with the City of Encinitas. Some of our programs in the Sustainability Division that we're advertising today are our Green Building Incentive Program, which gives those in the permitting process an expedited plan check if they meet certain criteria, and also our upcoming Home Energy Assessment Toolkit, Home Efficiency Assessment Toolkit. So be on the lookout for those programs. Come talk to me if you're interested in them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jashawn. I'm with San Diego Community Power. So we're a not-for-profit org that generates the energy that comes to homes in certain cities in San Diego County, and Encinitas is one of them. We also have a bunch of programs that we're launching. So for example, we have a solar battery program. So you get a battery for your home and you get incentives for the size and then how much energy from the battery that we take from it. So come check us out. We have some information for you.
Jeremy Reed with San Diego Gas and Electric. I represent the California Energy Commission on the Title 24 Energy Code update. So we have great information, everything from electrification, new requirements per code, state level, electric vehicles. We also have the heat pump requirements, so feel free to stop by and get some collateral. And if you would like, we have some great courses that we offer too.
Okay, thank you all, and thanks for participating in our event today. This kind of rounds out the theme, which I heard from them and which you'll hear from me and from Bruce. The theme with this training today is really a lot about electrification. That's kind of where we're headed in terms of focusing on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as a community. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off the training and make sure you get as much information out of this as possible to help support your project efforts. Okay, so today will be, hold on, two slides.
Can you introduce yourself?
I can, yes. Let me make sure the slides are working. There we go, okay. Did you do that, Ryan, or okay. All right, we'll have Ryan advance the slides for us. Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, my name is Crystal Nahara. I'm the Sustainability Manager for the City of Encinitas. So I manage our Sustainability Division, which is in Development Services. There's a lot of interaction between my division and our discretionary review and our building review and approval process. So we also have today here Bruce Cheney. He's going to be helping with some of the technical components of the training. So the two of us will kind of tag team. So that takes care of introductions, and then we'll also be introducing you to our Green Building Ordinance and what's new in the ordinance. We recently adopted an updated ordinance in June, and it is now effective as of mid-September. So we'll share that with you. The new updates are largely around the energy components and then some of the EV charging components related to some of the state code updates in the mid-year update. So Bruce will touch on those. We'll also have a couple other topics related to our ordinance that we'll touch on, and then we'll cover the permit process, and then leave you with some resources that you can refer to once you leave here today and have additional questions or want to reference some of the details. And then lastly, we will have, we're going to try to have some time at the end for question and answer. And with this size of a crowd, we thought the best way to do that is, if you do have a question as we're talking, feel free to write it down on a note card. And one of our team members will come around and pick up those note cards and kind of collate them. There might be similar questions, and then we'll try to get to as many of those as we can at the end. If we can't quite get to them, we will answer them, but in an off-site effort, and make sure that we get those answers to you. Okay, so we touched on the welcome. You've got me, Crystal, and Bruce here today, helping you out with the training. And then just a reminder, if you can silence your cell phones, talked about questions already, and then there will be access to all of the training materials after the training. So we'll email out all of the materials, and then they'll also be available on our website. So today we want to make sure that you leave here with an understanding of why the city adopted our REACH code, what changed between with the new ordinance and the intervening code cycle, and specifically getting into the requirements, we want to make sure that you understand when we refer to new construction versus additions and alterations, we want to make sure that those definitions are clear. And then as it relates to new construction, we want you to understand the compliance requirements there, and then the same thing with additions and alterations. There's different requirements for different types of permit requests. And then make sure that you understand how to apply and how to comply on your projects. And then when you leave here today, you'll have access to fact sheets and the green building checklist, and then additional resources as well. So let's start with what are REACH codes. Let's start at the beginning, and why are cities passing them. So let's start with kind of taking a larger view here and what the state is doing the focus really is on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and trying to meet our future climate needs or mitigate some of the climate issues we might potentially be having in the future. So the state has passed quite a few bills and executive orders related to setting goals and targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the state. The latest one was adopted in 2022, and that actually set a zero emission goal to achieve by 2045. So in response to that, the state building code has been reacting and focusing on reducing emissions via the state building code as well. And the main things that we see in the state building code are a focus on decarbonization, so that's trying to get carbon out of the buildings. Mainly, the two ways that you do that is you look at the natural gas sources and then the source energy from the utility and whether that's renewable or not. And then the second thing that the state code is trying to address is how the buildings can be responsive and to be more harmonious with our utility grid. So what that looks at is when is the energy being generated versus when is it being used in the buildings. And so that is kind of a very nuanced and maybe not so much apparent kind of on a project by project basis, but over time that's the goal of the state codes and where they're kind of transitioning to. And so why is the city involved, or what are we doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? So the city of Encinitas has a climate action plan, and one of the first things you do when you develop a climate action plan is identify where your energy is coming, where your emissions are being generated in the city. And in Encinitas, the majority of our emissions are coming from transportation, so that's people commuting to and from work, it's those tailpipe emissions that you're probably pretty familiar with. And then the other large part of our emissions is actually from our buildings in Encinitas, and that comprises our electricity sources and our gas sources. So the electricity source, when it's generated at the utility, whether it's at a natural gas plant or a renewable site like a solar farm, certain types of those sources are generating emissions. So the goal there is to reduce the off-site emissions, but then within the home, there are natural gas sources of emissions directly in the home, and that's where that 17% of emissions is coming from. So those two buckets are what we're really trying to target here today with the training in terms of reducing emissions. And the way that we do that is through what we call in the Climate Action Plan CAP measures. So what these measures do, we've got 20 total CAP measures, and what they do is try to reduce emissions in various ways through various efforts, whether it be projects or programs or initiatives or policies. We're trying to get all of these things done to meet our local targets that we're trying to achieve, that we set in our climate action plan. So the 8 measures that you see here, 8 of the 20 are actually related to buildings in some way, and they're directly related to, and then how they get implemented is through our permitting process for buildings. So whether it be residential energy efficiency, non-residential energy efficiency or decarbonization, like I mentioned, requiring more solar PV for non-residential. We also have some requirements related to EV charging as well. And then the last line here is a mention of our residential gray water requirements, and that's actually a measure that's been on our books in terms of permitting for quite a while, since 2015, but has had a refocus and we've kind of folded it into these other efforts because they're very similar in terms of being related to efficiency. When you reduce your water use, you're also actually reducing your energy use at the same time. So, what is a REACH code? I keep mentioning that word. If you're not familiar with the term REACH code, it's a local policy or regulation that sets energy efficiency and sustainability standards beyond those that are mandated by the state code. So it's kind of kind of like a slang term, I guess, that we use in the industry. But what technically it is for us in Encinitas is what we refer to as our green building ordinance is our REACH code. Some people can call it something different. And then what that ordinance does is actually enacts building code requirements that are incorporated into our Encinitas Municipal Code along with all of the state requirements. So typically REACH codes aim to promote higher energy efficiency performance and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I might be going out. Sorry about that, guys. And then promoting use of renewable energy sources, and then lastly to support electric vehicle adoption. And then, so where will you find our local REACH codes? Like I mentioned, you will find them. Thank you. Let's try that. Okay. Try number 2. So you'll find them in 2 places. Our REACH codes are located in our energy code, which is Municipal Code Section 23.12.080. And in that code, you'll find existing building requirements and new construction requirements, and then also our electric readiness requirements. And then in Code Section 23.12.110, that is our green building code, and that's where you'll find the electric vehicle requirements and the gray water requirements. Okay, so what is new with this new green building ordinance that we most recently adopted? So the main thing that occurred is we did have to rescind our prior all-electric requirement. It was determined by the courts that City of Berkeley had a similar requirement, and it was determined to be it went too far beyond what the federal government is actually required to be enacting. So as a result of that, all local municipalities that had adopted an all-electric requirement did have to rescind that requirement, and in place of it now, as part of this new ordinance, we've adopted a higher energy efficiency standard, a higher performance standard for certain new buildings, and also more extensive energy readiness requirements. So even if you are building with natural gas, you would need to be required to set up all the wiring and make the home essentially just plug and play for future conversion to electric appliances. And then lastly, I'll just mention there were no changes on the other requirements, but they are all still in place in the codes. And then there's a couple other additions that we'll mention, and that is related to the intervening code cycle, since the timing was very similar for our ordinance. So we will touch on some of the new EV charging requirements in the intervening code and new embodied carbon requirements. And then lastly, we'll briefly touch on the plumbing code section, where there's some new alternative pipe sizing methods. Okay, this is my last slide, and I wanted to bring up discretionary review as it relates to the Climate Action Plan and to the California Environmental Quality Act, because if your project does need to go through discretionary planning review, it may be required to also do a CEQA analysis. And you have an opportunity here to streamline some of your analysis if you want to align your project with the city's climate action plan. There's two key things that you need to do in order to achieve that alignment. Number one is to be consistent with the city's energy code and green code. And that's a pretty easy thing to do because you're already going to be required to do it at the building code or at the building permit phase. So that's an easy check the box. And then the optional component is to construct your project all electrically. And if you do that, then you are in alignment with the city's climate action plan, and you can streamline your CEQA analysis. If you still want to opt to have some gas appliances, then you would need to do the more robust, full-blown project level CEQA analysis for your greenhouse gas emissions, and then you would need to mitigate for those extra emissions that would occur from the natural gas use. So if you went that route, then you would need to make sure that the conditions of approval, or the city would help you make sure that in the conditions of approval, that it's clearly stated that there are those mitigation measures, and that's how you're meeting the local compliance for greenhouse gas emissions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Bruce.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bruce Cheney. I'm a HERS rater. If you know what that is, I do the special testing that's been required in California since 2010. Make sure your home or your air conditioning works the way it's supposed to, not using more energy than necessary. I'm also the national version of a HERS rater, so I actually go out and I score homes, measure how efficient they are, figure out what can be upgraded into the home. I'm a building inspector as well as a plan reviewer, and my primary job is training the building departments for the utilities, so Cal Edison and SDG&E, what the energy code requirements are, how to review the plans to make sure they meet the energy code requirements, and then the inspectors, how to do the inspections out in the field to make sure the way the building was built, it does meet the energy code, and again, hopefully it's not using any more energy than necessary. So that's who I am. Can we get a raise of hands in the room? How many homeowners do we have? Okay, how about contractors or builders? How about consultants, energy consultants, HERS raters? Okay, so in my trainings I try not to talk crap about anybody, but if I do and you're in the room, I'm not talking crap about you specifically because you came here to my class. Usually when I talk crap about somebody, it's trying to lay a point of something that was being done wrong or something that was really being done right, and somebody that had an issue with it. So I'll try to be careful who I talk crap about because again, the training I do, that's just the way it is. So new construction, if you're building a completely new construction building, you're going to have higher performance standards for both single family and multifamily. When we say multifamily, it's important to understand that the energy code made a change this code cycle. Previous code cycle, multifamily was in non-residential. If it was over 4 stories, a mix of non-residential and low-rise, it was 3 stories or less. There's completely new code sections, so all multifamilies covered in those code sections, whether it's 3 stories or less or 4 stories or greater. Just realize that there's still significant differences between 3 stories and less and 4 stories and greater. When we're talking about low-rise right here, we're talking about 3 stories and less and single family. So there's going to be additional electric readiness requirements for all mixed fuel buildings, which are part of the energy code right now, that if you're using any propane or fossil fuel-based appliance like natural gas, you've got to size your electrical panel, your service drop, you've got to leave reserve space in those breaker panels for that future electric appliance, and you've got to actually run the conductors from the electrical panel to that location of where that planned appliance is going to be. Additions or alterations are considered new construction if more than 50% of the roof framing is removed, if more than 50% of the exterior bearing walls or columns are removed, and the proposed conditioned area in an addition or alteration more than doubles that of the existing building's footprint. Now keep in mind these are specific to Encinitas and they're actually in the ordinance, that there's a little bit different definitions and requirements when it's outside Encinitas, not part of the REACH code. So new construction, single family duplexes and townhomes, all electric is strongly encouraged. Again, it can't be required because that's superseded by federal requirements, so it's not allowed, but it is strongly encouraged. So what we're looking at is a source energy score, an EDR, that's energy design rating. It's part of what gets populated on your compliance documents, the energy calculations you have to generate for the building department. What we're looking for there is that the source score is 4.5 or better. So in other words, if you're just building down to the minimum for the energy code requirements, you're gonna have to exceed that by at least 4.5. And in a couple slides, I've got an example of what that looks like on the compliance documents. We'll show you that as well. The exception will be dwelling units 1,500 square feet or less. And again, electric readiness for mixed fuel buildings. So we've got a note here about having a condenser location for a future heat pump heating and cooling system. So for example, if your building is a heat only, it doesn't have air conditioning currently, you're gonna have to designate a location on that building for the future for a condenser to be located outside. So if they wanna switch over from that gas heating, they're gonna have a location, the wiring pre-planned for that condenser for that heat pump type system. All the other energy code requirements as far as electric ready apply obviously as well, which means your water heater being battery ready, your space conditioning, the cooktop and the dryer, that if any of those are fossil fuel based currently, again, electrical panel, space, the wiring, the service, everything has to be pre-plumbed, pre-wired and ready for that. One thing to keep note of on that is if you're using, for example, a gas water heater right now, heat pump water heaters, which is what the future is and what the state's really pushing, need a condensate drain. So that's something a lot of people aren't considering because you've got a fan blowing air over a coil. There's going to be times a year that the air is warm and humid and that coil is going to be below the dew point. So you do get condensate coming off that heat pump water heater. Now it's not condensate like if you have a condensing furnace where it can't be drained to the grass or anything like that, so it's not going to be acidic, but you just need to be aware wherever that future heat pump water heater location is going to be, you need to keep in mind that you need a condensate drain that will flow away from that. Okay, so basic code right now would call for solar photovoltaics, and hopefully everybody's aware that anything new construction this code cycle, non-res, low-rise, high-rise, single family, if it's new construction, it requires solar photovoltaic. In the base code right now, the climate zone we're in, it calls for a heat pump water heater, and then it would still allow a natural gas furnace with a standard split direct expansion air conditioning system. So what you would see if you put that into the energy calculation to show compliance, your EDR score is not going to be very high. It's going to be just over what you need to pass.
Excuse me, what is PV? I missed that.
PV is photovoltaic, so solar electric on the roof. So here's some examples of packages that would pass. So the first one, the all electric plus 80% PV, meaning having enough solar to offset 80% of the electricity usage in the home, plus having compact water heating distribution. What that means is all the end uses of hot water are located within a certain distance based on the pipe diameter from the location of the water heater. So for example, in current code, if you have a half-inch line, it can't be more than 10 feet away from that water heater. So that means all your end uses are in real close proximity to that water heater. You have a high efficiency heat pump water heater, so an NEEA Tier 4 heat pump water heater. It's not a standard off the shelf, it's got to be the higher efficiency unit. And then also heat pump heating and air conditioning system. And that would have to be at least a 16 SEER. So that combination of measures would get you that source EDR score of a positive 5.9. So that package right there would meet the requirements right now. All electric plus high efficiency equipment, R49 insulation in the attic with buried ducts, meaning that those ducts are completely buried inside that insulation. Again, the Tier 4, the really high efficiency heat pump water heater, and then again 16 SEER 2 heating and air conditioning equipment. And if you're used to seeing SEER, you don't deal with mechanical equipment a lot. SEER is no longer an applicable efficiency metric. Everything has to be SEER 2 now. The SEER rating that they used to rate equipment under was only using 1/10 of an inch of static pressure to measure the fan energy, which means there's no filter or ducts basically hooked up to that air handler. It's just plugged in and running. The federal government changed those standards back in January 1, 2023. They have to actually use 1/2 of an inch, which is a lot closer to what most residential air handlers have to work under. So everything has to have a 2 after it now for the efficiency metric, HSPF 2, SEER 2. And what that means is you're getting a much more efficient unit, and you're getting a unit that the energy efficiency measure of it is a lot closer to real world conditions versus some of the manufacturers kind of came up with to get through the DOE. Last one, mixed fuel and battery. So a basic heat pump water heater doesn't have to be the NEA rated Tier 3 or Tier 4. Basic HVAC, so they're showing that the condenser outside, which basically what we're talking about there is having a gas furnace with split AC, and then a 10 kWh battery. That would get your EDR score to 13.3. So you could still use a gas furnace and beat that source metric, but you're trading off the energy, basically the carbon from that gas furnace, with the addition of the battery to that home. So this is what the energy calculations look like. If you've never seen one of these before, this is typically page 2 of the CF1R, the Certificate of Compliance. This is what documents all the features that your building has to meet, that the building department's going to check against your plans to say, yes, your plans match this. Your calculation comes up with a number showing all these numbers are positive. We've got 3 numbers on there. We've got source, we've got efficiency, and then you've got total. The source is the number that represents how carbon intensive your building is, whether it's using fossil fuel-based appliances or using a lot of energy at the time of day that there aren't a lot of renewable energy on the grid. So that source represents your carbon intensity. The efficiency number is how efficient is your building, or how close is it coming to Title 24, Part 6. So before we use these metrics, we just used to have the efficiency, and it was based on a TDD number. And the problem with that is you can make a really inefficient building. In other words, you can have an all-glass building in the middle of the desert and then cover it with solar panels and use the solar to offset the inefficiency of the building. That's not allowed since solar became a requirement in the code. So what that efficiency number is measuring is it's saying Title 24, Part 6, the Energy Code has this minimum requirement. You've got to show that you beat that. And that's what that efficiency number is you're not allowed to use those renewables to offset things like insulation, windows, west-facing windows, things like that. The total EDR number is taking your efficiency number and subtracting the credit for your solar or batteries. So all 3 of those numbers on anything new construction have to be positive numbers. You have to beat all 3. What we're looking for here with the Encinitas Climate Action Plan is on new construction, that source number has to be 4.5 points better than minimum. New construction multifamily, so again, all electric is strongly encouraged. We're talking about 3 stories or less. So source energy margin must be 8% better than standard. So you have to be 8% positive on your carbon score. Mixed fuel multifamily buildings have to be electric ready again, and that's just part of the base energy code anyways. Any place you're using a fossil fuel based appliance, size the electrical panel, provide the wiring. These are example of multifamily packages that would get us 8% or better. So the first one, the all electric. So we're using a central heat pump water heating system. The air conditioning system is going to be a heat pump. And by the way, if you're not familiar with heat pumps, all air conditioning systems are heat pumps. We've just been using them in one direction for the last 20, 30 years. We're only moving the heat from inside the house to outside. The only difference between an air conditioner and a heat pump, it's got a reversing valve. It can reverse the flow of that refrigerant to using the indoor unit as the condenser instead of the outdoor unit, and therefore it can move the heat into the building. So heat pump, heating, air conditioning, 14.3 SEER2, and then the prescriptive envelope measures, which those prescriptive envelope measures are going to give you minimum U factors and require advanced walls, which means you have a frame wall with cavity insulation and also continuous exterior insulation on that building. So that gets us to 28%. All electric plus an 80% photovoltaic offset. So again, central heat pump water heating for all the units. Heat pump HVAC 14.3 SEER2, and then sizing the PV to offset 80% of the electricity usage in that building. And then again, prescriptive envelope measures. That gets that source number 52% better than standard. Last option, if we're going to do mixed fuel, then we're going to size the PV system to offset 100% of that building's electricity use. Central gas water heating, so federal standards would say that's minimum 80% efficiency. 14.3 SEER2 heat pump heating and air conditioning. And then again, sizing your PV based on the occupancy of that building to offset 100% of the electricity use. And again, meeting those prescriptive envelope requirements from the code, that's going to get you to 11% better than standard for that carbon score. By the way, I know I talked through a lot of this fast. We'll have a question and answer session afterwards, and I'll put up my contact information as well in case you have questions into the future. We're going to be here to support you, your clients, or the contractors that be. So new multifamily electric readiness requirements, so the state code requirements, if you have, instead of having a central plant, where you're having one plant providing the hot water for all the units, you have one water heater in each unit. Then there's energy code requirements that allow different types of water heaters, but one thing you do have to do is you have to make a heat pump water heater ready. So that means reserving a 240 volt 30 amp breaker space in the panel and providing a 10-3 wire from that panel to that location. So for example, if they had a gas water heater right now, they're only going to need a 120 volt 20 amp breaker. And they're going to still run that 10-3 wire, but then the red wire is going to be marked off, tagged, reserved, future 240 volt domestic hot water, both in the breaker panel and out at that outlet box by the current water heater. The panel, the way that it's organized, you can't just gang all the breakers together at the top. I started my career as an electrician. We want to make those super neat and tight and have all the wires have nice angles on them. Well, you need to leave a space below the one for the water heater right now, because in the future, when the client wants to put in that 240 volt, that breaker space immediately below it is now needs to be marked off, reserved, future 240 volt domestic hot water, same as the wires that we take off. That way when somebody comes in and takes out that 120, they can just slap a 240 volt two-phase breaker in there. And that's important because, again, if we gang all the breakers up at the top of the box, for example, a homeowner might decide they want to put a welder in the garage. They build dune buggies. They see all the extra breaker space in the panel, they're going to use it up. Then they decide to put a spa in the backyard. If they use up all those breaker spaces for other things in the house, and then it comes into the future where they want to adopt this technology, they're going to have used up that breaker space. So these aren't empty, they're not spares. That panel has to be organized in a way and labeled that it's ready for the future uses, and so that you're getting from both phases of the electricity, not putting one 120 someplace and another one maybe on the same phase. All your other appliances, so your space heating, cooktop, dryer, same thing. You're providing a 240 volt service and at least 30 amps. If it's the cooktop, you're providing a 240 volt with a 50 amp and providing the wiring from that panel over to that location of where that appliance is. Now when you get to like your washer dryer, if you only have a washing machine, you don't have a dryer, which is what I'd recommend. We're in sunny, warm California, put a clothesline outside, much easier on your clothes, much more carbon friendly as well. But if you only have a washing machine, if you don't have a gas dryer, you don't have to run the electrical line to have a future electric dryer in there. You only have to run that electric line if you already have a gas dryer that you're going to use currently. So the additional requirements are you have to provide a space for a heat pump water heater. The thing to understand about heat pump water heaters, why they're so popular, is the thing called coefficient of performance. If you have a gas water heater or an electric water heater, you're putting 1 unit of energy into it and you're getting less than 1 unit of energy heating out of that. With heat pump water heaters, you have a coefficient of performance that's 2, 3, can be up to 4 on those tier 4 heat pump water heaters. What that means is for every unit of electricity you're putting in, you're getting 2, 3, 4 times the amount of heat out of that energy input. Instead of just using the electricity like resistance in that tank and then using that to heat the water, we're using electricity to create magnetism in motors that's using a refrigerant to get heat out of the air, and through the refrigerant expansion compression cycle, move that heat into the water. So what do you need if you're taking heat out of the air? You need air with heat in it. So you need a minimum volume of space, and you need a temperature range according to the manufacturer where that heat pump can actually stay in that coefficient of performance mode. And that's really important because all heat pump water heaters are hybrid. They have both the heat pump mode, which is where you're getting a high coefficient of performance and actually seeing the energy savings, but they also have backup electric resistance heaters. So if you don't give it a big enough space with the right temperature range according to the manufacturer's specs, you don't have a heat pump water heater because there's not going to be enough heat in the space for it to extract with the refrigerant and put it in the water. It's going to go into that backup electric resistance mode, which I don't know if you guys seen what electricity rates are from 4 to 10. You do not want to be cooking, cleaning, doing all your laundry and getting 100% of that from electric resistance. You want it to be able to stay in heat pump mode as long as possible. That's what we're saying here is we need a space and then we need access to temperate air. So it's either located inside conditioned space. If it's not located inside conditioned space, pretty much all the manufacturers of these units have a ducting with a hood kit that you can put on top of the heat pump water heater. So for example, if you're putting it in your garage and it's really hot in there in the summer, really cold in the winter, then you're going to provide the ducting kit. You're going to cut 2 holes in that garage wall and you're going to duct that heat pump water heater to conditioned space so it has access to air that's going to be within the temperature range that it'll work all year. There's also some manufacturers where, depending on the load, like in multifamily central units, a lot of times they'll actually vent that to the exterior of the building because the thing's going to be taking so much heat out of the air, it's going to be exhausting cold air. And you want to exhaust cold air into a unit that you're also trying to heat, you might want to be venting that to the outside. And again, when you have a central hot water system, so same thing, if it's a gas unit, you've got to make that space so it's heat pump water heater ready, meaning there's enough volume, there's enough space, or it has access to conditioned air to, again, so it can be working in that heat pump mode as much as possible. Multi-family electric readiness, central gas hot water system. So the REACH code is essentially full design. So your service drop, the electrical panel, the breaker space in the panel, the wiring to the location, space for those heat pumps, the tanks, again ensuring that you're going to have enough airflow so that thing will stay in heat pump mode. And again, the condensate drain is a big thing that most people don't think of condensate drains unless you're saying a condensing furnace or an air conditioner. These water heaters need to have that condensate drain as well. Calculations for capacity. So if you are using a gas unit right now, there's BTU equivalents in a minimum square footage of space. You're going to have to multiply out times that gas unit's current capacity to provide that space of that volume and enough area for that heat pump water heater to be put in its place into the future. There is a credit for certified energy analysts. They're not state certified, they're certified through KBEC. But if you use a certified energy analyst, they give you 1 point of credit on your single-family homes and 1% credit on your multifamily homes for having a certified energy analyst actually do the calculations that show that your building complies. Okay, questions and discussion? I covered it so well you're all blown away or you're speechless? You don't have to ask questions right now. Again, I'll hang out here afterwards. We'll put up my contact information, and again, we've got a lot of information over here at the booth. I'll be out here as well. So, no questions yet? I'll keep hammering through. Yes?
Property currently has a gas meter. When you go about either get rid of that gas meter, can you incorporate gas accounts?
So, just to be clear, you're saying you're going to do an addition or build like a new ADU and your property already has gas?
You know, demoing it, building it.
So, taking down an existing building and putting up a new building is her question, and the property's already served with gas. Again, that's going to be up to you because they can't tell you you can't use gas, but if you are going to use gas for your appliances in that building, you're going to have to make that building electric ready and then have to make it efficient enough so that you're basically offsetting the greenhouse gas emissions from that natural gas use. I've had experiences doing home energy audits and as a HER trader where I've had clients that had a celebration because they had their gas meter removed when they made the building all electric. But we do have people from SDG&E here in the room that can answer those utility side questions a lot better than I can. Any other questions? Again, anything new construction, if it's coming new out of the ground, just the base energy code requires that you make that whole building electric ready. What Encinitas is asking you to do is just make it a little bit more carbon friendly, that you're beating that carbon score by more than you would normally have to do. Okay, additions and alterations. So addition is, there's a specific definition in the energy code that an addition is anything that increases conditioned floor area and conditioned volume. An alteration is any modification to any part of the building. So the envelope, water heating, windows, air conditioning systems, that doesn't fall under the definition of a repair. Now, a repair is you're returning something back to its original condition, its original factory, original equipment manufacturer. So in other words, the kids put a baseball through a window. You didn't decide you wanted to put all new windows in the house, you're just returning that window back to its original condition. That falls under the repair definition. You're putting all new windows in the house, that's not a repair, that's going to be an alteration.'re going to have to meet the energy code requirements for that. So the triggers in the requirements on residential has to have a valuation of $50,000 or more. So you're not really triggering a lot of this on something as simple as an air conditioning change out or a water heating change out. But if you have a valuation of $50,000 or more, they're going to ask you to install one of the measures in the list, and I'm going to show you the list on the next slide. High-rise multifamily non-residential, the valuation $1 million or more, or 75% increase in floor area, or 1,000 square foot increase in roof area, you're going to be adding solar photovoltaics to that project as part of your requirement. So next, this slide is showing us what the basket of measures is, and it's based on the vintage of the home. Before 1978, we didn't have an energy code. That's when the energy code started. So it was based on basically what your builder wanted to do before that in California as far as air sealing and insulation. From 1978 to 1991, you've got a different package of measures you can apply. And then after 1991, they take off like windows and wall insulation, because there was already minimum mandatory requirements around those windows and walls after that, that changing them out might not actually offer that much of an improvement versus these other measures. But there are things like LED lamps, vacancy sensors, the water heating package, a cool roof, R38 attic insulation and air sealing. I won't read these all off to you, you can read them and go through the checklist on your own, but basically some of the more common measures you'd want to do to an existing single-family home if you're doing significant work on it, because you want to improve these areas anyways while you're doing the work. Multifamily, you'd be add any one of these measures, and again, it's basically the same measures as you saw for single family, and then it's broken down again by the vintage of the building, pre-78, 78 to 91, then 91 to current, and which measures are applicable. Additions and alterations, high-rise, residential, non-residential solar PV, so we increased the roof area by 1,000 square feet. Valuation of $1 million, that affects at least 75% of the gross floor area. So option 1, greater than, equal to 10,000 square feet. You're adding 15 kW per 10,000 square feet of floor area. If we're less than 10,000 square feet, then you only have to do a 5 kW DC photovoltaic system. The other option is you could comply with the current energy code as if it was new construction. So the current energy code is a calculation based on the occupancy in the climate zone, and you multiply out your square footage by the factors in that calculation, and it'll give you one requirement. And then there's also another requirement to take the available roof area and multiply it times 14 watts per square foot of available roof area. Whichever number would come up as smaller would be your energy code requirement for a solar photovoltaic system. So it's whichever one you choose, either the minimum based on your square footage here, or using the calculation that's in the current energy code for new construction. Okay, electric vehicle car charging requirements. So there's definitions first. So level 2 EV space, a parking space equipped with a fully operation level 2 electric vehicle supply equipment. So that means the wiring, the circuits, the charger, everything's there except for the car. EV ready, we've got wiring from the electrical panel going to the parking space, so there's a receptacle in there, but there's not an actual charger in that parking space. There's low-level power 2 receptacles as well. This is kind of where the Cal Green code gets a little wonky in my mind, that usually level 2 is a 40 amp, but they allow low power level 2 chargers, which are 20 or 30 amp chargers instead of the 40. So if your project qualifies for that, that would be, again, falling under the EV ready. And then EV capable, so a parking space that's linked to a listed electrical panel with sufficient capacity in that electrical panel to service drop to provide that 240 volt for 40 amp circuit to that parking space. So in other words, the conduit, the pull boxes, everything except for the wiring and the actual breaker in the electrical panel. If you have loading docks, so you have like a retail store or a warehouse store where big trucks are going to be coming in, then you're going to trigger the heavy duty EV charging, which means for medium and heavy duty electric vehicle car charging, you're going to have an additional requirement for those loading docks so those trucks can charge whether being loaded or unloaded. Those are significantly larger than level 2 chargers, or usually 400 or 800 amps, so you'll deal with that based on your project needs when you go through plan review. The electric vehicle summary, so this is from Cal Green, by the way. A lot of what I've been talking about so far is Title 24, Part 6, which is the energy code. Now we're talking about Title 24, Part 11, which is the Cal Green requirements. That's where you find the EV and the water requirements. So new construction, we've got the table breaks it down. Single family has to be EV ready. Multifamily, 15% of the spaces have to have chargers, 40% have to have receptacles, so somebody can't put a charger in there. Hotel, motel, 10% have chargers, 40% have receptacles, then non-residential is 8%. Adds alts down there at the bottom, what we're seeing, multifamily would have to have 10% EV capable, hotel, motels, 8% with the chargers in, then non-residential, 8% with the chargers, 15% EV capable. Questions on EV or solar photovoltaics? Or anything I just talked about. You guys are easy.
Another question.
Yes.
So, if you have a question, can we just call you directly?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll put up my contact information, and again, that's what we're here for, is we're free training and support. If you have questions, want to help you work through those questions in a way that, again, pragmatically uses the energy code and the climate action plan to get your building built as cheap and efficient as possible. Not a cheap building, but as cheap as possible in current condition. My company is Anchors Way Energy. Yes. Yes, I believe, are we gonna send, yes, copies of the slide deck will be available, yes. Okay, so yes, you can reach out to myself, and again, I just wanted to mention, we have a website called Local Energy Codes that breaks down a lot of this stuff based on the climate zone and what's cost effective, and has a lot of reach code information on it. We also have Energy Code 8, our booth. Please feel free to stop by after the presentation. We have a lot of material there that can help out. But again, this is an Encinitas specific requirement. So Encinitas has copies of the checklist. They have copies of the ordinance, everything on their website. And I would just encourage you to read through that and get those checklists and start reviewing your project as early as possible against those checklists to make sure you're not caught with any surprises or expensive change orders after it goes to plan review. Okay, other local new requirements and changes. So gray water, embodied carbon, and the alternative pipe sizing calculation. So gray water, new single-family dwellings must be pre-plumbed for gray water. This is relatively easy to do on new construction. I've done it in the last 2 houses that I lived in that were existing construction, so it's even possible to do in existing construction, just a lot more work. So way cheaper and easier to do with new construction. It has to comply with Chapter 15 of the Plumbing Code and 14876 of the California Water Code. So what we're looking for here is we can't have anything going from the toilets or the kitchen sinks or the dishwasher because there's going to be organic material in there that's not going to settle real well on your plants or in your yard. But it's coming from a washing machine, your bathtub, the lavatory faucets, then that stuff can all go to a gray water system and be reused to water your garden, water the yard, or go to a rainwater collection barrel for other uses. So again, pre-plumb for gray water, connection integrated with the landscape irrigation, accepting gray water from all the sources permittable, like we just showed on the last slide. So like the last slide just said, bathtub, showers, bathroom wash basins, washing machines, laundry tubs, but does not include wastewater from kitchen sinks, dishwashers, or obviously toilets. Exception, if you have a qualified soils engineer that looks at your soil and says this stuff is solid rock, you're on bedrock, there's no way the earth's going to be able to accept this additional water from your gray water system, then you would be able to get an exemption from doing that, but you'd have to provide the soils analysis proving that your ground is not permeable enough to actually accept the output from the gray water system. Embodied carbon, so new and adds and alts. CalGreen has these requirements, project greater than 100,000 square feet, required to demonstrate a 10% reduction in global warming potential using the ISO methodology, or install only products that meet the prescriptive global warming potential standards. And what that means is in CalGreen and other places, they have lists of materials and what their global warming potential is, so you're going to need to select your materials based on their global warming potential. Paints, mastics, drywall mud, all those things are in there. Or there's a reuse option instead for additions and alterations where you're reusing existing building components instead of throwing them away and buying new ones. So there's an alternative, either use the list and find materials that meet that based on the global warming potential, or reuse as much of the material as you can from the existing building. Adds and alts, projects greater than 100,000 square feet, maintain 45% of the existing primary structural elements, or a 10% reduction in global warming potential of the materials used instead. So either or. And again, the embodied carbon, CalGreen embodied carbon requirements, that's a link. I'm sure if we send this as a PDF, there's a way to grab the links from the presentation, so you'll be able to click on these links and actually access these additional resources. Alternative pipe sizing calculation. So I think it's been 80 years since the plumbing code was written as far as determining what the water requirements were for fixtures, and it has not been updated. It's called the Hunter's Curve, and that's finally been updated for the first time in 80 years, what you have to size your plumbing distribution to for your fixtures. And when you think about the low flow requirements we have on our fixtures, our toilets, every place else, it's kind of crazy they haven't updated this sooner. But it's Appendix N of the UPC. Allows for, again, reduced pipe sizing in single-family and multi-family dwelling units. These will be links, so you can click through and find these links. When you go to their website, they actually have an Excel spreadsheet that you can use to fill out based on your structure. That'll do the calculation for you to tell you what your allowed pipe sizing diameters and et cetera are, and what your fixture counts are going to be for your dry and your wet venting as well. I will just let you know that a lot of building departments are still learning about this. This is something that just went into effect in July. IFMO, the National Standard Setting Organization for Plumbing and Mechanical, Iggy Cruncheris has been going around doing a lot of presentations on this, and he breaks it down really well, so I'd recommend looking up his presentation online or go through and use these hyperlinks to learn more about it. But you're gonna have reduced pipe sizes, you're gonna have reduced thermal waste because these pipes aren't gonna have as much water in them that cools down every time you take a shower or wash dishes or something. So there's a lot of advantages to lower material costs, less energy losses, and again, just a more efficient building, because why do you need a 3/4 inch line if you're only allowed to take 1/8 of a gallon per minute out of that faucet? Okay, the permit compliance process, so we've got a single-family, multifamily, non-residential green building checklist, so you're gonna wanna get these from the city of Encinitas, like I said, based on what your project is, review your project against this, make any updates as necessary, and then submit this checklist with your plan set to the city so that they can review it. They're gonna have their own checklist as well, but all these checklists, you need to see them first, because it's much better to get it through plan review quickly, cleanly, versus having to do plan review by correction. So resources, again, these will hopefully be hyperlinks when we send this out, but there's the California Energy Code, so that's on the California Energy Code website. There's the Cal Green Code, which is on Housing Community Development's website. There's the California Plumbing Code, which there's online versions of that as PDF, but if you're gonna be dealing with it a lot, I'd recommend just buy yourself a copy, because that'll make it a lot easier. And again, Energy Code A's, our Title 24 trainings and our resources. Energy Code A's, we try and take the code and all these requirements, and there's over 3,000 pages now between the Energy Code, the compliance manuals, the joint appendices, and the reference appendices. So a lot of people that don't deal with this all the time, that's overwhelming. And a lot of it's reference to other things, it's reference to other codes. So what we try to do with Energy Code ACE is boil those requirements down to a couple pages, put it on a fact sheet, add some pictures in there, make it glossy and colorful, and then put in hyperlinks to those other reference documents or national standard setting organizations when those apply. So please definitely don't struggle with just looking at the black and white from the Energy Code or the Commission. I would always recommend going through Energy Code ACE first. If you can't find the answer on there, you're still struggling with the code, then please, by all means, reach out to me or somebody else, and we'll be happy to help you. Again, there's resources on Encinitas website, so the fact sheet and the checklist. Again, I'm a big checklist fan, because I may sound like I know a lot, but I don't. I have 4 or 5 different code cycles in my head, 20 different projects going on, and I don't always remember everything when I'm looking at a plan set. So to keep myself in line, I always use a checklist based on each plan set. That way when I'm going through, I don't miss anything. So I would use these checklists the same way, use it as kind of a project template to help you work through all the different measures to make sure that you don't miss anything. EVs, again, we've got fact sheets on those, and there was some updates in the intervening code cycle, so hopefully those are the updated versions of those. And then other resources like the embodied carbon and Cal Green requirements, that alternative method for the pipe sizing, and then calgreeninfo.com is a new website. I think it just started like 4 or 5 months ago. That'll help, again, additional resources on these Cal Green requirements as well as embodied carbon. Okay, any questions on those slides? Yes?
Where does fire department come in, any of this?
Fire department is going to review a lot of this, but I'm not a fire code specialist. I'm only an energy code and Cal Green code, but yes, there's definitely going to be a review from the fire department on all these things, setbacks, where you're putting those batteries, things like that. They're definitely going to want to have to put an eyeballs on that.
So the information would be included in all this that you were talking about?
Correct. Well, again, we're not covering the fire code here, but your plan, so when you submitted the plan review, or part of what the city's going to do is they're going to have somebody that reviews those fire code requirements for that building as part of the plan review. Yes?
Single-family residence with an ADU, does that make it multifamily?
It does not, no. They've changed that. The definition is basically less than 2 units is a multifamily, but once you get over 2 units, that usually falls into the multifamily definition. Even that, there's some gray areas that usually the authority having jurisdiction will make a decision based on what they're seeing in the surrounding properties.
We have been seeing single family with an attached ADU and JADU, they consider that multifamily.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the gray water thing is a little bit dicey because the city doesn't allow infiltration of drainage west of 5. So I don't think you can do a gray water system either because they won't allow stormwater to infiltrate either. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah, I would just include that as a note and reference, previous corrections or the ordinance that that's based on. Anybody else? Okay, like I promised, there's Crystal's information, my information as well. I am based here in San Diego, not in Encinitas, so I can't afford to live up here. I live way out in the whole east on the mountains on my own little ranch, but I'm a local resource, so again, if I can be of any help, please feel free to reach out. Utilities pay me to answer your questions, and I'd rather answer one of your questions and have you struggle or get the wrong answer and make your project more expensive. So that's all I have. Thank you very much, everybody. Again, appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come listen to us speak about this.
Thank you, Bruce, so much for your technical expertise on all of this. Please do use them as a resource. We pay for it through the cost of our gas and electric through our utility, so take advantage. And then same thing with me at the city or any of the staff at the city. If you've got questions about what we just went over, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any specific questions about your project or refer you to the right person at the city to help you get the right answers. Thanks again for being here. We have a lot of lunch left over, so if anyone would like to take back some sandwiches to your home or to your office mates, feel free to grab a few and take them home. Yeah.
You mentioned something